One of the most striking things about Mendelssohn's musical language is the extraordinary exuberance that characterizes what he says. And here is a piece in D minor, and D minor historically and culturally is the key of the devil, of the last judgment of the Dies Irae. You know, it's a scary business altogether. And yet, hearing this piece, one feels more ecstasy than tragedy in the whole thing. It goes back to the spirit of the Baroque with Bach and Handel, who could write extraordinary pieces in the minor mode that felt joyous. You know, the simplification came later, but Mendelssohn sweeps us back in that direction. And I think everything that one has to say here has to be influenced by the lightness and the loft of things. So for instance, the strings that have so many luscious melodies all the way through this piece, thinking about the curvature of the melody, the loft of the melody, I have a feeling that you're using a slightly too constant bow pressure. And as a result, you're sustaining everything. I understand that because you're worried about this Leviathan who's in back of here. And it's not Mendelssohn's fault. I mean, yes, the piano parts are drastically overwritten. There's no question about that. I'm a pianist. I'm allowed to say that. But if you experience these pieces played on the instruments of the time with gut strings in the strings and with a period piano with parallel strung construction and thinner strings, this problem of balance largely disappears. So Derek has the unenviable obligation to try to play, in effect, mezzo fortissimo, you know, so that we get the sense that he's playing with maximum energy, but somehow that the amount of sound that crosses the stage doesn't cause the string players to have to go into defensive mode. So thinking that as you have a melody that may be anchored at the bottom and rise upwards and downwards, think about letting the sound and the bow pressure subside a little bit, and then as it comes down on the other side, you can dig in a little bit more, and I think you'll get a bit more character that way. You know, content and character over speed. So Derek, it's absolutely dazzling that you can play the coda of that piece at that speed. But, you know, the character of agitation doesn't depend on the metronome marking. It depends rather on this extraordinary kind of kamikaze feeling that one has of the self-destruction that's just coming around the next page when you get there. So don't feel that you have to rush to that extent. Remember that the tempo marking of this piece is molto allegro agitato. So it's interesting. If you had to deconstruct the sentence grammatically, where does the molto belong? Is it the molto allegro agitato? Or is it molto allegro agitato? What I think is not so important, but I would suggest that having put agitato into the tempo marking, he means that there is nothing in the piece that isn't at some level being touched by the sense of the agitated. Even in the rapturous and radiant tunes that come here and there, there's always going to be a sense of something going on in the heart that causes the pace of the audience and their heartbeat to quicken. All right, let's get going again. Now, you know, Daniel, you have a basic decision that you have to make at the very beginning of the piece. You've got an upbeat. Where is that upbeat going? Most people think that it goes to the first note of the downbeat. So, of course, if you want to stretch it a little bit for rhetorical insistence, well, that's perfectly fine. But if what you want to do is launch a heroic an extraordinary piece of immense scope, then you're not going to aim to the second note. You have to aim much farther beyond that, even if you stretch the upbeat. And what do you feel? You feel that the anchor is the D. And the F starts to pull, the F above the D starts to pull the piece a little bit upwards, but inertia brings you back down. So you breathe a little bit more deeply, and the D goes to an A, which is a little higher. And finally, by going, okay, the inertia is overcome, the D goes to the E, and the piece is underway. So you sculpt, and we shall respond. No? good. It's good. Let's make you feel more comfortable, because I think you're a little bit boxed in by the rhythms. You know, the sense that you use the bow to have the melody really travel. Curvature is always interesting, and straight lines are not interesting. Yeah? So, and never be afraid of breathing. You know, and it's as if you get more and more inspired. Every time you extend the phrase just a little bit more, you think, oh, this is going very well. Very well indeed. Oh, I feel so good about this. Hey, how about you? You like it too? Yeah, it's good, huh? All right. The danger sometimes is that when you have a sustained note, you stop moving the bow. So you know, you always have to keep things in a state of flux. Now, Derek, as far as the opening is concerned, obviously, you know, you're mindful of the balance problem, and you're marked pianissimo, and you're marked pedal. And I would suggest that if you want to get at what a Mendelssohn piano would sound like, you would use the pedal a little bit more shallowly, so that there's a little bit less overhang, but that therefore the motion between your two hands picks up the agitated quality, which will sustain what they do without competing with it. Yeah? So just don't put the foot down quite so far. You're trying it out, so it's going to take a little while for it to feel really comfortable. But you, like Daniel and like Valerie, have a curvature of phrase. And we want to feel the way that swings back and forth. And with every swing, it becomes more intense and more astonishing. Huh? Never miss an opportunity to put a little sway into things. So Valerie, when you have the rhythm of the half note, yeah, and then the quarter, you need to sway more through the half note and let the quarter be lighter. It's so easy to just find the whole thing getting a little bit earthbound. So this also has to do with variations in bow speed. How about we take... where were we? Yeah, the forte was at about 23, something like that. Yeah, now we know. To be a little bit more of a daredevil, you will respect the eighth rest. And not, you see, because you're allowing the pedals to sustain them, and the result is extremely lovely, but it's not nearly as risky or as pyrotechnical as it could be if you would dare just simply pick the pedal up and suddenly hear that little split second of silence, and which then leads higher and higher until you get to the ecstasy of the long chain of quarter notes. Yeah? Wherever you like. Good. and understand that each one of those arpeggios shoots off into the air, but when you finally get to the most sublime one, the E flat, it pushes you around the corner into the resolution. So even though there is still an eighth rest there, the E flat is pushing its way into what happens to the phrase immediately afterwards, rather than cutting it off. Last time at the same spot. And these are the places for the so-called Marlborough dynamics, you know. When Valerie suddenly gets her subito piano when you're coming down, you, Derek, have to give her cover. Yeah. Just dive underneath. Nobody will notice that you're doing it. They'll just notice that the balance is better than they've ever heard it before. You know, it's a deep, dark secret. Someone comes up to you and says, "How do you do that?" You say, "Oh, you can't afford it." Where you like.
246. 1 bar 40 coming.
That's fine. You can do a Mozart trick here if you want, Derek, which is when your right hand comes rushing up those chromatic scales, pedal it, blur it. Blur it on purpose. The thing you're never supposed to do, your piano teacher will always tell you, you can't do that, it blurs. No. And everyone goes, "Wah!" You know, because it's a question of chromaticism for the sake of flamboyance or for the sake of sensuality. And in this particular case, I vote sensuality. Huh? Just a little bit before that. I think you, geographically, Valerie, you need to be more responsive to the changes of register. You know, get a little bit overheated. It's fine. It's legal. Maybe not in the state of Tennessee, but you know, here in New York, it's fine. Yeah? The cello with a tune. 67, pick up. Here's the other thing. There are certain things that one doesn't see on the page, and one of them is a change of harmony. So you arrive here in A major, and suddenly it goes a step beyond it to D major to G minor. So and the audience, in an intuitive way, notices that something is pushing forward in a fateful way. And they won't, if you don't show them, they will not know. It's not their fault. And it's not Mendelssohn's fault. You know, he assumed that people would notice that going from an A major chord to a D major chord would engender a different color and a sense of fatefulness. All right? Same thing with your melody. You see, here your texture suddenly changes, Derek, you know? You're playing the melody, and then suddenly at 79, the left hand gets nervous, and the right hand gets a little bit flinty and a little bit, through its triplets of eighth notes, rather hyperactive, which is a great moment, therefore, in spite of the fact that he doesn't have a new dynamic and it's still, technically speaking, fortissimo, it's a great moment to drive back a little bit to forte or forte plus, so that we understand the balletic sense of yup, up, 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 dee, da, ba, 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 ba. Really use the long notes to act as a desperate pull on the emergency brake to keep the car from going off the cliff. Huh? All right, so wherever you like.
The G minor, 80.
That's a good place. I vote for that. Okay, yeah, and you know the F sforzando in the cello at 98 and the violin D sharp to A, which doesn't have a sforzando but might as well just have one, that's the crux of the matter, right? You're asking an existential question. The answer to that question is going to be a fantastically beautiful tune, but the audience doesn't know that yet. The audience is worried about what you're doing, unless they've heard it before and they say, hey, you know, don't worry, folks, you know, because it's about to get really nice. Now, you're not going to tell anybody that, you know. They've got to get scared all by themselves. So that's an important thing, and I think you need to help me, Derek, a little bit with hearing that we actually hear the direction that the melody is taking in the midst of all of this, because that's what causes the whole thing to come to a simmer. Yeah? How about we start at 91? Yeah, and this is the old Beethoven trick where he repeats it over and over again, and then he cuts it into half, and then he cuts it into quarters, you know, which is a way, by making the phrase itself shorter, it makes the momentum seem stronger. But remember, you cannot just simply literally play a repetition of a phrase just because it says so. Because if you were talking to another human being, you would never, if you said the same sentence twice in succession, inflect it the same way. You would never say, hey, how about going to dinner? Hey, how about going to dinner? Hey, something wrong with you? You could say, hey, how about coming to dinner? Hey, how about coming to dinner? See? And you have to do that with music, because otherwise it's, you see? And when music is flat, guess what they do? They think about dinner. Huh? I promise you that's what they think about. Yeah? Okay. Last time at 91. Yeah, you know, I wouldn't mind if you put a little bit more vibrato into that, because, you know, you're just talking, it's an aside to yourself. You're not even playing for them, but Mendelssohn puts that in there because he says, you know, there'll be at least 3 people in the audience who hear that and their heart will suddenly go, oh. You know, not because, you know, Daniel's melody is not worth hearing, but because there's some extraordinary empathy that emanates from that pointless exercise in beauty. And when you get to the return of the piece and the cello plays the tune again, and there is the violin soaring like an eagle over the whole thing, singing its quiet song of mournfulness. You know, I'd like to say that this is the first time in history it happens with Mendelssohn, and Mendelssohn is a champion of it, absolute champion in the violin concerto and in these pieces and so on. But as far as I know, the first time it happens is in the Mozart G minor symphony. You know, when you have... And the bassoon. You know, he's saying, oh gosh, everybody, it's not good, is it? I know. Be courageous. I know. Sometimes life is just like this. What can I say? So there you are, and enjoy that sense. And you will have to decide. The more resonant the hall, you know, the more the sound will do it for yourself. But the drier the hall, this is not a particularly resonant hall. It needs a little help from you. Maybe a little bit more sustaining and a little bit more vibrato, just so that you emerge just for a second. And then people say, did she just play there? No. Yeah, there it is again. Come on, Harry. Don't tell me you didn't hear it. All right, okay. Let's go right to the cello solo. Pick up to 119. So that you understand, Daniel, that the repetition of the first half of this tune is designed for you to build up until finally you're ready to go up to the top of the mountain and descend on the other side. But yeah, Felix, we heard that already. You don't have to say that again. No. There it is. Oh, I knew he was going to make it. Yeah, I bet on him. Yeah. But remember, the enemy of great art is the matter of fact. Trusting that what's on the page suffices and needs no help from you. We're not talking about making the music into something it isn't. We're talking about looking into the music and seeing the essence of how it moves us and excites us, and making that palpable to those who have never heard the piece before, and who cause everybody. Why do you go to a Shakespeare play? You do know, don't you? You do know that Ophelia is not going to end up somewhere on the East Fork, you know, of Long Island, you know, in a split-level house with a bunch of kids around, you know? You know that, but you go to Hamlet anyway. And why do you do it? Because the intensity of the moment causes you to forget the fact that you know how it's going to come out. Because it's so glorious, it's so incandescent, it's so radiant, it's so terrifying, it's so exalting that it doesn't matter that you know, because in that moment, you forgot. So you have to help the audience both to forget and to relive what they do. And you do that by making differences out of things and understand that if Mendelssohn is repeating that idea, he's doing it for the purpose of giving an undertow that will suddenly allow the whole thing to exalt. All right? Show them how, Daniel. Good. Little piece of advice, agogix. The long notes are interesting, the short notes are not. Di di da di ba da di ti ba di ba dum bum. You see, make it sound more natural by using a little bit more bow on the half notes and lightening up on the quarters. Whether it's the piano, it doesn't matter, the strings. It's just a way of making things a bit more spontaneous and natural. We can go on. This is all very, very good. The wonderful thing about working with musicians of this caliber is you say a couple of things, and then they get inside it, and you don't have to say things anymore because they're already there. Well, this is the most exalting, most wonderful thing about trying to teach, which is to see what happens when everything suddenly defies gravity and starts to sway and flow. All right.
Yeah, so I'll do my
One more time. You too, Derek. Ah, ba 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 ba, na dee tom da dee da dum. good. You know, the agitato is absolutely central here, Derek. And what you want to do is to move your fingers as fast as you can, not the tempo, but the speed with which you press the notes down is extraordinarily rapid, you see, because that creates the sense of agitato. And when you come to these arpeggios that go upwards that we talked about before, since the strings have half notes, put the pedal down for the first beat and then release it as the arpeggio moves up to the upper sector. And I think you'll find that it has a bit more flair. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, how about your solo, agitato? Considering the staccato and the strings at the end of that passage, I think your octaves in the left hand can be a little bit lighter and a little bit shorter, a little bit less pedal. It becomes more brilliant and creates a better balance problem. Right from that fortissimo, 2 bars before the strings come in. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Derek, but it seems to me when that A in the left hand goes to the G, I absolutely melt. That is something extraordinary. By the way, he didn't invent it. Mr. Mozart. You know, there's something about watching that scale go downward that pulls us, you know, by the heartstrings. So really, really enjoy that. We're going to run out of time in a minute. It's all my fault. I'm sorry. I talk too much.
Yeah,
right on it. Yes, so if you need to, you can start, Valerie, the tune here with a little bit more intensity so that each time it repeats and it falls, we get that sense gravitationally of sinking and sinking. And we don't like the direction that it's taken, but we're too fascinated to look away. You know? Oh, I don't know what's coming, but it's not going to be good. Yeah. I guess we have to stop there. I'm heartbroken to quit so quickly. But you know, I think these attitudes, they're just ways of considering things that you need to make into your own personal property. That is, seeing the strategy of the piece, seeing the direction in which it unfolds, understanding that at every point in a piece of music, like in your own lives, there are decisions to be made. And they can be really extraordinarily powerful. And to know, as Robert Frost said, I took the path less traveled upon, and that has made all of the difference. That the audience understands how fateful it might be to come up against a half cadence at some place where you're playing a dominant chord and people think, what are they going to do? You know? I mean, the mystery of great suspense is getting us to all out of whack when we know nothing is going to happen to Cary Grant, and we know that nothing is going to happen to Jimmy Stewart, and nothing is going to happen to, you know, to Tom Cruise. Because if they do, then the movie is over, right? So it's not going to happen. And yet, we manage to allow ourselves to be excited. And if it works for the movies, for God's sake, it's got to work for Mendelssohn. If this culture has any chance of surviving, it has to be because you and I have a glow in our heart, and we need people like the three of you, without which life will never be completely fulfilled or meaningful. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you so much. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for being so patient with me.
Thank you.
Pleasure.